It's Not Fair, a Ghosts Movement essay. It's not fair is one of the first sentences many people learn to say. It arrives before explanation, before politics, before morality has a vocabulary. It appears in the body as a tightening, a heat, a pause where something does not align. A rule is applied unevenly. Care is offered to one person and withheld from another. Effort is ignored while advantage passes quietly through. The sentence is spoken not to accuse, but to name a mismatch between what was expected and what occurred. For a child, fairness is not an abstract principle. It is sensed through consistency, tone, and response. It is felt in whether protection arrives when it should, whether listening is genuine, whether rules hold their shape across different people and moments. When fairness is present, it rarely announces itself. It feels ordinary. It allows attention to rest. When it is absent, the body notices immediately. The sentence emerges because something has shifted, because the ground no longer feels level. Many people grow up learning that this sentence is unwelcome. They are told it is childish, simplistic, disruptive, or naive. They are encouraged to replace it with better reasoning, stronger resilience, or quieter acceptance. What is rarely addressed is that the sentence itself was not wrong. It was an accurate report. Something was not fair, and the body recognized it before language caught up. Over time, repeated experiences of unfairness do more than disappoint. They shape attention. When rules change depending on who is involved, when explanations arrive selectively, when care is inconsistent, the body adapts. It learns to watch. It learns to scan. It learns that participation may carry risk. This is not cynicism. It is learning. The nervous system adjusts to patterns long before beliefs are formed. This adjustment is often subtle. The person does not become oppositional. They become careful. They notice small discrepancies others overlook. They hesitate before trusting authority. They ask questions internally even when they remain silent externally. They develop an awareness that language and reality do not always align, and that alignment cannot be assumed simply because it is promised. In many environments, this carefulness is misunderstood. It is labelled as negativity, resistance, or unwillingness to engage. Yet what is actually present is memory. The body remembers what happened when fairness was unreliable. It remembers moments where speaking up resulted in dismissal, punishment, or withdrawal of care. It remembers when rules were used to protect some and expose others. These memories do not sit in the mind as arguments. They sit in posture, breath, and hesitation. As people move from childhood into wider systems, this early formation meets institutions, cultures, and moral frameworks. The hope is often that these structures will provide what early environments did not, that rules will be clear, care will be consistent, and authority will be protective rather than arbitrary. Sometimes this hope is met, often it is not. Systems tend to speak in generalities. They rely on categories, policies, and procedures. They promise fairness through uniformity. Yet uniformity is not the same as fairness. When systems become too invested in their own coherence, they can lose contact with lived experience. Language becomes abstract. Exceptions are treated as inconveniences. Complexity is reduced to compliance. At this point, something important happens. Systems do not lose credibility because they are challenged. They lose credibility because they stop feeling believable. People sense when rules are applied mechanically rather than thoughtfully. They notice when outcomes are defended, even when harm is visible. They feel when explanation replaces listening. These moments register long before they are articulated. This is where many people begin to feel out of step, not because they reject order, but because the order on offer no longer resembles the fairness they remember. The sentence, "It's not fair," does not disappear. It goes quiet. It becomes internal. It turns into watchfulness rather than protest. People remain present, but not fully surrendered. They participate, but conditionally. From the outside, this can look like skepticism or refusal. From the inside, it feels like loyalty. Loyalty to something older than the system itself. Loyalty to a sense of dignity learned through experience, not doctrine. Loyalty to moments where fairness was embodied rather than promised. It is important to say clearly that this loyalty is not about perfection. Most people understand that life cannot be fair in every instance. They accept limitation, loss, and unevenness as part of living among others. What unsettles them is not imperfection, but distortion. It is the gap between what is said and what is done. It is the insistence that something is fair when it clearly is not. When people are told to ignore this gap, to accept explanation over experience, something fractures. Trust does not break dramatically, it erodes. Participation becomes strategic rather than wholehearted. People learn to adapt themselves to systems rather than expect systems to adapt to human reality. This is often the point where labels begin to appear. Anti-establishment, difficult, hard to please. Yet these labels miss the underlying formation. The person is not against structure. They are against the loss of meaning that occurs when structure becomes self-referential. They are not rejecting morality. They are wary of moral certainty that cannot account for lived difference. Fairness in this context is not an entitlement. It is an internal reference point. It is a memory of how something once felt when care was consistent, when authority was protective, when rules made sense in the body. People carry this memory quietly. It becomes the measure against which systems are sensed, not judged. This is why unfairness is recognized so quickly. It is not because people are demanding something new. It is because they are remembering something old. They know what fairness feels like because they have known it, even if briefly. That knowledge does not disappear simply because it is inconvenient for a system to honour. Many people who resonate with this experience do not seek to dismantle institutions. They seek to remain intact within them. They want to participate without abandoning their own recognition. They want to belong without surrendering their sense of what feels right. When this is not possible, they drift, not out of rebellion, but out of necessity. This drifting can be misunderstood as disengagement. In reality, it is often a form of care for the self, for others, for what has been learned through experience. It is an attempt to avoid becoming complicit in something that feels misaligned. It is a refusal to normalize distortion. Within this landscape, the pull towards alternative ways of thinking or being is not about novelty. It is about relief from language that feels hollow, relief from rules that override context, relief from having to silence an early recognition in order to function. What matters here is not whether systems are good or bad. That framing quickly becomes abstract. What matters is whether systems remain in relationship with the people they shape, whether they can listen when something does not fit, whether they can hold complexity without defaulting to correction. When systems cannot do this, people compensate. They become translators, adapters, buffers. They carry the weight of adjustment themselves. Over time, this weight accumulates. It does not always show as anger. More often it appears as tiredness, caution, or quiet withdrawal. This is where many people arrive at a crossroads. They can harden, turning their recognition into identity, or they can remain open, carrying the sentence without sharpening it into a weapon. The difference matters. Hardening offers clarity, but it also narrows perception. It replaces one certainty with another. It risks reproducing the very rigidity that made fairness feel absent in the first place. Remaining open is more difficult. It requires staying with the recognition without demanding resolution. The sentence, "It's not fair," does not need to become a verdict on the world. It can remain what it always was, a moment of noticing, a signal that something needs attention, a reminder that human experience cannot be fully managed through abstraction. For some, this sentence becomes a quiet companion. It surfaces when language feels misused, when authority feels unresponsive, when care is unevenly distributed. It does not demand action, it simply marks a boundary. This matters. This does not align. Something is off. Holding this sentence carefully allows people to remain in relationship with systems without losing themselves to them. It allows participation without erasure. It allows dissent without hostility. It keeps the body involved in judgment rather than outsourcing it entirely to rules or roles. In this way, It's Not Fair becomes less about protest and more about orientation. It keeps people facing towards dignity, consistency and care, even when these are not readily available. It does not promise improvement. It does not guarantee justice. It simply refuses to forget what fairness once felt like. This refusal is quiet. It rarely announces itself. It lives in pauses, hesitations, and choices not to fully comply when compliance would require self-abandonment. It lives in the decision to listen longer, to question gently, to step back rather than push through. In a world that often prioritizes coherence over care, this quiet refusal matters. It preserves a space where human recognition can survive. It allows memory to remain active rather than nostalgic. It keeps the possibility of fairness alive, not as a demand, but as a felt reference. The sentence does not need to be resolved. It does not need to be outgrown. It can be carried forward, changing shape as the person changes, but remaining recognizable. A simple phrase that continues to orient attention towards what feels right, even when the world insists otherwise. It's not fair is not a complaint. It is not a theory. It is not a position. It is a moment of honesty that many people learned early and were taught to silence. To write from this sentence is not to argue with systems, but to honour the human capacity to notice when something no longer aligns. That capacity is fragile. It can be dulled through repetition, dismissal and correction. It can also be protected through recognition, language and shared understanding. When people realise they are not alone in carrying this sentence, something eases, not because fairness is restored, but because recognition is. In the end, the sentence remains. It does not fix the world. It does not dismantle structures. It does something quieter and more enduring. It keeps people oriented towards what matters, even when they cannot name how to get there. That may not be fair, but it is honest,